Zombie outbreaks have wiped out billions, collapsed entire countries, and some even created monsters that are smarter than you. So today, I'm breaking down the survival chances of an average Joe in the biggest zombie apocalypses to find out which one is the deadliest. Starting with outbreaks you could easily survive, then infections that spread through air, mutate entire species, and make fighting back actually spread the virus more. By the end, only one universe leaves humanity with no path back, kicking things off with the outbreak that was practically over within the first day. Shaun of the Dead. Shaun leaves his house, steps past bloody handprints, slips near a body, walks around a zombie in the street, and buys a cornetto. The entire opening joke works, because absolutely nothing in his routine changes enough to wake him up. That tells us quite a lot about this outbreak. The zombies are slow, painfully slow. They shamble towards sound and movement, grab anything close enough, and spread the condition through bites. Destroying the head stops them. A locked door buys time. A fence works until human stupidity or weight of numbers ruins it. And if Shaun had looked up from his own life for 10 seconds, he could have started preparing before the Winchester became his only idea. The opening collapse is still serious. News broadcasts fail, roads clog, emergency services lose control, and crowds of the dead surround buildings. Your first danger would probably come from a family member, neighbor, or panicked driver, rather than some super zombie crossing half the city to find you. But civilization recovers quickly. By the epilogue, television has already absorbed the undead into ordinary British life. Zombies appear on game shows. They do menial labor. People keep infected relatives chained in sheds, which is objectively a terrible policy. Although Shaun gets to play video games with Ed again, so he seems happy enough. The army's arrival also tells us something useful. It is fast, organized, and overwhelming. Soldiers cut through the remaining crowd outside the Winchester moments after Shaun and Liz emerge. There is no suggestion that every major government has vanished, or that the countryside belongs permanently to the dead. The outbreak reaches crisis level and gets pushed back within days. Even the disguise tactic works. Shaun's group imitates zombie movement and walks through a crowd. It falls apart because they talk, react, and lose formation, yet the dead are visually simple enough to fool at close range. That is a survival tool available without specialist equipment. That recovery matters. Humanity understands the rules, reestablishes order, and turns the surviving dead into a deeply questionable labor force. Our ordinary survivor could stay indoors, gather water, avoid crowds, and wait for trained people to clear the streets. This is still an apocalypse. A careless person dies. An unlucky person dies. Somebody trying to rescue every member of their extended family probably dies twice. A prepared survivor has a real chance. The next universe agrees. It practically hands you an instruction manual, as long as you can follow it while being chased through a supermarket car park. Zombieland. Rule number 1, cardio. Fair. When Zombieland's infected, see you. They move. They sprint, climb, throw themselves across obstacles, and keep attacking until enough physical damage shuts the body down. A locked front door helps less here. Distance matters more, and Columbus survives because he treats every ordinary task like a small military operation. Check the back seat, wear a seatbelt, avoid public bathrooms, double tap. Some of his rules are genuinely useful. Others feel suspiciously shaped by one specific bad day Columbus had before the film began. Beware of bathrooms is really just do not let a zombie trap you with your trousers down, which I hope most people could work out without assigning it a number. The important idea is discipline. Columbus scans spaces before entering. Tallahassee commits completely when violence starts. Wichita and Little Rock trust almost nobody. Those habits let 4 people cross a country where normal society has collapsed. The supermarket sequence provides the cleanest stress test. A lone infected can hide between aisles and attack from a few meters away. Columbus survives through distance, obstacles, and repeated strikes. He does not need to identify a rare mutation or test whether the zombie understands language. The problem is fast, violent, and mechanically straightforward. Zombieland. Double tap. Later shows communities adapting in different ways. Babylon bans weapons and survives behind height and isolation. Other survivors live on the road or occupy fortified homes. The evolved T-800 zombies absorb more damage and attack with greater persistence, making later encounters much rougher, although they still fall to enough conventional force. 10 years have passed and people remain capable of travel, agriculture, and, frankly, ridiculous interior design. And society has collapsed. The roads are empty, cities are abandoned, and the surviving population appears tiny. Whatever strain created these zombies spread fast enough to beat the United States. The films leave the exact incubation period and global numbers fuzzy, so we cannot invent a clean 12-second timer. What we see is an aggressive, mobile infected population and very few organized institutions left to oppose it. Still, the zombies die in conventional ways. Guns work, heavy impacts work, Vehicles work extremely well until somebody crashes one. The infection does not float through sealed rooms or awaken every human corpse on Earth. If you avoid physical contact and learn how the infected move, your odds improve sharply. 1 year later would be lonely, dangerous, and badly short on dentists. It would also remain habitable. Farms can be restarted. The dead do not evolve into armored siege creatures. Survivors can clear buildings one by one. Zombieland destroys civilization more thoroughly than Sean's outbreak, yet it leaves humans with understandable rules and a usable planet. Columbus can write those rules on a wall. Another survivor can read them. Dead Rising gives you even more counters. Medication, biological weapons that specifically kill zombies, shopping centers filled with anything that can be held like a weapon. It also gives humanity a corporation that sees all of this and thinks, we should probably cause another outbreak. Dead Rising. Willamette looks impossible the first time Frank West photographs it. Thousands of zombies pack the streets. The mall is surrounded. Helicopters pull away. Every corridor can fill with bodies, and the government is already hiding how the outbreak began. Then Frank picks up a bench. Dead Rising zombies are dangerous in numbers, but almost insultingly vulnerable to improvisation. Baseball bats, lawnmowers, frying pans, shower heads. Frank turns an entire shopping center into evidence that human beings will weaponize literally anything under pressure. The infection comes from genetically modified parasitic wasps created during research intended to increase livestock production. Larvae inside human hosts eventually emerge, kill the victim, and trigger zombification. Bites spread the condition too, creating the familiar crowd of infected residents. And queen bees offer a very strange countermeasure. Crush one near a group of zombies and the released effect kills the parasites in the surrounding hosts. That alone knocks Dead Rising down. Imagine discovering a device that can instantly drop a room full of infected without harming the user. Most universes would kill for that. Then there is Zombrex. It suppresses the parasite's development and requires repeated doses for the rest of the patient's life. Katie Green survives for years because Chuck keeps finding it. Access is the obvious problem. A medicine that works every day becomes a death sentence the morning the pharmacy is empty. Frank himself becomes infected after Willamette, which makes the medicine's value concrete. He can continue living, thinking, and working as long as treatment remains available. That gives the franchise a category of infected survivors who are medically dependent instead of immediately lost. The queen weakness is equally important and morally odd. A mature queen releases an effect that destroys the parasite in nearby zombies, dropping whole groups at once. Military research later weaponizes this biology. The counter can be carried into a crowd, activated and repeated. Very few entries in this ranking give ordinary humans an area answer that precise. Dead Rising keeps returning to human exploitation. Phenotrans profits from Zombrex. Outbreaks are engineered, covered up, or manipulated. Fortune City becomes another mass casualty event because somebody deliberately releases the infected. Los Perdidos falls. The pattern spreads well beyond one mall. Yet these are repeated disasters, with identifiable human causes and powerful counters. Governments still function. The infected can be cleared. Survivors can suppress a bite, and in some cases, use queens against entire groups. The franchise looks apocalyptic because each game drops us inside the worst possible location at the worst possible time. Zoom out, and humanity keeps surviving its own greed. Project Zomboid removes the theatrical villain. No umbrella. No executive explaining the plan. Just radio voices becoming less certain, one day at a time. Project Zomboid. This is how you died. Project Zomboid tells you the ending before your character even loads into Kentucky. You can barricade a farmhouse, grow cabbages, collect rainwater, and become frighteningly protective of one working can opener. Eventually, one window gets left open. One scratch becomes infected. One helicopter pulls a horde toward the place you thought was safe. The official lore around the Nox event is intentionally incomplete, so custom sandbox settings do not count. Players can change transmission, zombie speed, and mortality. We are following the broadcasts and fixed story surrounding the exclusion zone. In early July 1993, the military seals off an area around Nox Country. Officials call reports exaggerated. Telephone service cuts out. People outside the zone protest because their relatives are trapped inside. Radio hosts speculate about chemicals, disease, contaminated meat, even divine punishment. Nobody receives a dependable answer. At first, bodily fluids seem to explain the outbreak. Bites and exposure inside the zone create the dead. Then cases appear without that contact. The story strongly suggests a second route, commonly understood as airborne transmission, affecting most of the population while a small minority remain immune to that route. Those immune survivors can still die from bites and infected wounds. The broadcasts make that shift painful because each institution has only part of the truth. Noxtalk callers report smells, illness, and military movement. LBMW presents official updates that become harder to trust. The automated emergency broadcast system keeps giving weather information long after ordinary programming breaks down, as if the machinery never received permission to acknowledge the end of the country. The military line also creates the exact crowd authorities need to avoid. Families and protesters gather outside the exclusion zone demanding answers. When panic and violence break out, soldiers open fire, and the barrier fails. Nobody in that crowd needs to make a stupid horror movie choice. They are responding to a government that trapped relatives behind a fence and refused to explain why. Power and water fail on variable dates during gameplay, reflecting the collapse of people maintaining them. Once the taps stop, survival becomes labor. Containers need filling. Rain must be collected. Food spoils when refrigeration disappears. A player can defeat every zombie near their home and still die because civilization used to perform 1,000 invisible tasks for them. That is the point where a careful plan collapses. You can avoid teeth. You cannot avoid breathing before anyone knows the air is dangerous. By the time broadcasts acknowledge infections outside the exclusion zone, containment is already failing. Louisville is threatened. Reports spread across borders. Television becomes static. The voices that taught you how to boil water and stay inside simply vanish. Project Zomboid's Dead are configurable in gameplay, although the default experience gives us slow, persistent zombies vulnerable to destruction of the brain. They are manageable in small groups. The threat comes from scale, silent infrastructure failure, and the possibility that exposure happened before the story started. Our survivors' first 72 hours depend heavily on biological luck. If they share the rare resistance to the suspected airborne strain, staying away from crowds works. If they do not, the cupboard full of canned food becomes irrelevant. 1 year later, the world looks much worse. There is no confirmed cure, no functioning national response, and no heroic ending waiting beyond the map boundary. Project Zomboid never gives the player the satisfaction of solving the apocalypse. It gives them time. And eventually, time runs out. The Walking Dead makes that outcome even cleaner. Everyone is carrying the condition already. The only question is, when they die. The Walking Dead. A walker is a terrible fighter. One-on-one with open space and any decent weapon, an ordinary adult should win. Walkers are slow, clumsy, and usually too degraded to protect themselves. Destroy the brain and the body stops. Avoid the mouth and the filthy hands. Do not stand next to a suspicious corpse. Simple enough. At least in theory. Then somebody dies peacefully in their sleep inside your settlement. The Walking Dead's defining rule is universal reanimation. Every living person carries whatever causes it. A bite usually kills through the severe infection and trauma it creates, and death activates the transformation unless the brain is destroyed. Old age, illness, an argument that turns violent, every death produces another walker behind the walls. That is how weak zombies keep winning. Noise gathers them. A gunshot pulls walkers from surrounding streets. A herd becomes a moving environmental disaster, pushing against fences until metal bends or one rotten support fails. The prison seems defensible until illness kills people inside and a human attack shatters the perimeter. Alexandria has walls, food, and experienced fighters. A quarry full of walkers still becomes a problem capable of overrunning it. The barn on Herschel's farm is a perfect early example of survivors applying incompatible rules. Herschel believes the walkers are sick people who may be treated. Shane sees active threats contained behind weak timber. When the doors open, the group discovers Sophia among them. Every tactical conversation ends because one child forces everybody to confront what reanimation has already done. Knowing destroy the brain and doing it to somebody you recognize are completely different tasks. The outbreak gains time every time a family restrains a bitten relative and waits for a cure. The saviors later weaponize walker blood on blades and projectiles. Whisperers wear cured walker skin and move inside herds, proving the dead can be redirected by people who understand their behavior. Both tactics raise human danger more than walker biology. The creature stays simple. The surviving population becomes inventive around it. There are long-term environmental costs, too. Roads choke with vehicles. Fuel degrades. Medicine expires. Millions of bodies contaminate spaces and waterways. A slow walker cannot catch a healthy adult in a field, while the collapse surrounding that walker can kill through infection, hunger, or childbirth years later. Human conflict carries half the blame. The governor attacks the prison. Negan builds an empire through fear. Communities waste ammunition and lives fighting each other while millions of corpses remain scattered across the country. This universe has a strange habit of making the walkers manageable, then watching survivors create a much harder problem for themselves. The television continuity later introduces rare walkers displaying limited climbing, door opening, and tool use behavior. Other parts of the wider franchise handle variants differently, so we should not pretend every walker suddenly became a tactical genius. Most remain slow, most remain predictable, and decades later, organized human life exists. The Commonwealth supports tens of thousands of people. Alliances rebuild trade and transport. Smaller settlements farm, educate children, and develop procedures around death. A person on watch knows to check the dead. Sick residents can be restrained before they turn. Humanity learns. That makes The Walking Dead one of the clearest examples of personal danger and species danger pulling apart. You could absolutely die in the first week because the city is crowded and nobody knows the rules. Once you reach a competent community, your odds become surprisingly decent. The planet still supports crops. Walkers decompose. The infection never stops, but civilization can grow around it. I would take this over almost every runner universe coming later. Honestly, I would take it over being stuck in Zombieland with people who think firing guns at an amusement park is a sensible celebration. The walkers ended the old world because nobody was ready. They struggle against people born into the new one. And that leads directly to the franchise that created the modern version of this nightmare, where the dead were already learning long before anyone called them walkers. Romero's Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead begins with a cemetery and one man moving strangely in the distance. Johnny teases Barbara. The figure gets closer. A few minutes later, Johnny is dead, and Barbara is running toward a farmhouse without any idea what attacked her. There is no clean origin. A news report discusses radiation from a returning Venus probe, and authorities treat it as a possible explanation. The films never lock that theory down as a final scientific answer. The important rule arrives through observation. Recently dead bodies return to movement, and destroying the brain or burning the body stops them. The farmhouse should be survivable. It has doors, windows, tools, a cellar, and several adults. Ben boards it up. Harry insists the cellar is safer. Every decision becomes a fight, and the humans gradually dismantle their own chance of making it through the night. When armed posses clear the countryside the next morning, Ben is mistaken for one of the dead and shot through a window. Your first day here is grim, although the outbreak itself remains physically manageable. The ghouls move slowly. They use basic objects and respond to light, noise, and visible prey. A coordinated group with firearms can clear them. Dawn of the Dead widens the scale. Cities are failing. Emergency broadcasts continue while police and civilians ignore orders. The mall offers food, shelter, and security, yet its entrances draw the dead because some trace of memory pulls them back to places that mattered in life. The survivors create a workable little world, and raiders destroy it. That memory gives Romero's Dead an unsettling tactical quality long before Bub appears. They return to the mall without understanding commerce. Their bodies remember the route. A survivor cannot assume an abandoned human habit has become irrelevant, because thousands of dead people may still drift toward the same places they visited while alive. The original Dawn also shows authorities losing control on live television. Experts argue while station staff keep obsolete rescue information on screen because removing it would reduce ratings. A SWAT raid on an apartment building becomes chaos when residents refuse to surrender their dead. The apocalypse expands through denial at every level, from one family hiding a body to broadcasters protecting a format. By Day of the Dead, the living are pushed into isolated facilities. Dr. Logan's experiments with Bub reveal that the dead can remember. Bub salutes. He handles a razor. He recognizes music and a telephone. Later, Romero films push that learning further, with Big Daddy organizing other zombies and using weapons. Land of the Dead makes the social divide literal. Wealthy survivors occupy Fiddler's Green while everyone else lives in the dangerous streets around it. Big Daddy leads the dead across water, learns to use a firearm, and directs other zombies against the tower. The settlement's confidence depends on an old assumption that zombies cannot reason through the river or the defenses. That assumption lasts until the night it matters. Romero's later infected still move slowly enough to be observed. That gives humanity warning and gives the dead time to learn. The two sides develop together, which is a stranger long-term problem than a static horde decomposing behind a fence. So the threat changes across the series. The bodies remain slow, yet their minds are not completely empty. They repeat habits, recognize objects, and sometimes coordinate. Humanity faces an enemy that can improve while its own institutions shrink. There is still no airborne cloud hunting survivors through sealed rooms. Universal reanimation resembles The Walking Dead. Anybody who dies with an intact brain can rise. Firearms work. Fortified islands and remote settlements remain possible. The films repeatedly show human groups sabotaging themselves, which raises the confirmed civilization damage without making each ghoul individually deadly. Romero's Apocalypse earns respect because it does not need speed. It wins through ubiquity, panic, and time. A dead relative inside a locked room remains enough to start the whole problem again. We have now given humanity every advantage. Slow enemies, visible transmission, a clear target in the brain. Time to think. The next outbreak starts with a little girl appearing at a bedroom door and gives her father about 3 seconds to understand what she has become. Dawn of the Dead. Anna is a nurse. She finishes a long shift, drives through an ordinary suburban neighborhood, and goes to bed beside her husband. By sunrise, the girl from next door is standing in their hallway with half her face torn away. Luis tries to help. She bites him. He bleeds out on the bed, goes still, then launches himself across the room at Anna. That opening from the 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake answers our first question immediately. These zombies turn quickly enough to erase the normal period where a family understands what has happened. They sprint at full speed, smash through weak barriers, and keep charging after injuries that would stop a living attacker. Brain destruction still works. Everything before the headshot is the problem. Anna escapes through the bathroom window and reaches her car. The suburb is already collapsing. Houses burn, cars crash, neighbors attack one another on front lawns. A man opens an ambulance door and gets swallowed by the chaos. The camera rises above a city losing control in real time. The news montage widens that collapse across the country. Emergency anchors struggle to explain the dead. Religious figures offer competing answers. A television host finally tells viewers to disconnect the head from the body, turning a survival rule into public information after countless people have already learned it at home. That delay is the runner's greatest weapon. With Romero's dead, a neighbor can see an attack, retreat, and tell the next street what happened. Here, the witness may already be infected by the time they reach the next front door. Our ordinary survivor needs to make the same decision Anna makes. Leave early before the road becomes a trap. Waiting for a clear government instruction could cost the entire 72-hour test. Once a runner sees you, the distance across a car park means almost nothing. The mall proves these infected can be contained. Heavy doors, rooftop visibility, and a secure perimeter turn it into a comfortable refuge. The survivors have food, water, and enough empty space to start pretending the world outside does not exist. Then every weak point begins stacking up. A bite inside the group, a pregnant infected woman restrained in secret, a rescue attempt for a gun shop owner across the street, hundreds of zombies gathering below because the building sits inside a population center. When the group finally tries to cross the car park in armored buses, one collision opens the vehicles and the dead pour inside. Speed transforms small errors into immediate mass casualties. You do not get the slow shove against a fence seen in The Walking Dead. A breach becomes bodies sprinting through the breach. The infected still have clear limits. Headshots work. They do not display planning or weapon use. There is no confirmed airborne route. Islands may offer safety, although the film's final footage makes one particular island look like the worst possible holiday choice. Dawn's outbreak is a serious jump. A prepared person has far less warning, cities empty much faster, and rescue becomes dangerous, simply because opening a door takes time. Black Summer takes that runner problem and adds an ugly rule. Every fresh human death can create another sprinter almost immediately. Black Summer. One person dies. That is all it takes to reverse a room. Black Summer's infected reanimate so quickly that a survivor can watch somebody collapse and barely have time to step backward. The new zombie gets up running. It does not spend a minute staring blankly at its hands. It goes straight for the nearest living person. This makes every rescue dangerous. Every gunfight carries a second gunfight inside it. If one member of a group gets shot in the chest, the survivors are suddenly dealing with the original attackers and a fresh infected at arm's length. The diner sequence shows the practical problem. A small group secures a building while one zombie prowls outside. That sounds manageable. They try to distract it, trap it, work around it. The infected keeps returning, slamming against the glass and finding new angles. Killing one moving target becomes difficult because everybody is exhausted, frightened, and awful at landing a clean shot to the head. Black Summer also refuses to make travel clean. Cars become traps when roads block. Groups split at intersections and may never reconnect. A person running beside you can be knocked down, turn, and join the chase in the time it takes the rest of the group to notice they are missing. Weapons create confidence and noise together. Untrained people fire too quickly, hit torsos, and attract more infected. Soldiers are dangerous because they have ammunition, and because every exchange between armed groups leaves new bodies ready to rise. The human conflict and zombie conversion happen in the same seconds. That last part matters. Zombie fans casually say headshot, as if an ordinary person can hit a sprinting skull while backing through a doorway. Most people miss stationary targets under controlled conditions. Add screaming, recoil, and a creature that does not slow after being hit in the torso, you may empty the entire magazine. The stadium offers the promise of evacuation. Thousands of survivors move toward it through a city where nobody trusts anybody. Alliances last minutes. Soldiers fire into crowds. A single wrong turn sends people into another stream of infected. By the time Rose reaches the stadium, the expected rescue is absent. Black Summer never needs a complicated mutation system. It takes confusion seriously. Information is poor. Ammunition is finite. Humans move faster than plans can form, and the dead are fast enough to punish every hesitation. The brain remains the target. Buildings can be cleared. The series also leaves the global end state less defined than our highest-ranked worlds. That keeps it below the finalists. Inside the first 72 hours, though, horrendous. Any casualty in your group can become the fastest person in it. Train to Busan places that exact chain reaction somewhere even tighter. One infected passenger, narrow aisles, locked doors, and a train already moving away from every station that might still be safe. Train to Busan. A young woman stumbles onto the train as it leaves Seoul. She is injured, shaking, and already changing. A crew member finds her on the floor. Seconds later, the woman bends backward, rises, and attacks. Now solve the carriage. You have seats on both sides, luggage overhead, and one narrow route forward. People behind you have not seen the bite. People ahead only hear screaming. Every passenger who stops to help creates another body blocking the aisle. The infection races through the first carriage in a wave. Train to Busan's zombies run, pile over one another, and throw themselves through openings without concern for damage. Conversion is extremely fast, although individual timing varies with the scene. A bite victim can sometimes hide the wound long enough to move between groups. That uncertainty is nearly as dangerous as a fixed timer because nobody knows when the person beside them will turn. The survivors discover useful weaknesses. The infected respond intensely to sound. In darkness, their ability to locate uninfected people drops, allowing Seokwu, Sanghua, and Yongguk to move through several carriages using phone alarms in the darkness of railway tunnels. They wrap their forearms, push as a unit, and close doors behind them. The station at Daejeon shows how quickly a planned rescue can become another ambush. The passengers leave the train expecting soldiers and find the military personnel infected. The stairwell funnels zombies downward while survivors are forced back onto the platform. Every official destination may already have fallen before the train reaches it, and the infection uses emotional proximity. Seokwu watches Sanghua get bitten while holding a door for everyone else. Later, he is bitten protecting his daughter, and has only enough time to secure the cab before he turns. Fast conversion still leaves a brief human goodbye, which is exactly enough time for a frightened victim to stay near the people they can infect. This is one of the rare zombie sequences where the tactics feel like something frightened people could actually invent. Nobody becomes a perfect marksman. They use the environment. The zombies also struggle with some barriers once visual contact is broken. Newspapers across glass hide the survivors in the next carriage. Train doors create temporary checkpoints. A single uninfected person can still destroy that advantage by opening one at the wrong moment, which is exactly what happens when fear takes over the remaining passengers. South Korea's military response eventually establishes a protected area around Busan, and later Peninsula shows the Korean peninsula quarantined while the wider world continues. The local catastrophe is enormous. The infection does not receive confirmed global victory. That geographic limit removes Train to Busan from the final group. An ordinary passenger on the wrong carriage still faces dreadful odds. Somebody elsewhere in the world has time to close borders, study footage, and avoid the same mistake. Darkness gives survivors a route through this train. The next outbreak creates infected who can stand in daylight, speak to you, and remember exactly why they hate you. All of us are dead. Hyosan High School becomes a trap because schools are built to contain people. Long corridors, locked gates, stairwells connecting crowded floors, classrooms full of desks and narrow windows. Once the Jonas virus reaches the students, the building feeds it hundreds of hosts who have almost nowhere to go. The virus begins with science teacher Lee Byung-chan. He wants to help his bullied son fight back, so he experiments with a virus designed around fear and aggression. The result escapes through an infected laboratory hamster and then a student. By the time adults accept what is happening, ambulances and hospitals are carrying it beyond the school. Victims change quickly. Their hearts stop while the virus stimulates the brainstem and continues driving the body. Bones crack. The infected become violently reactive to sound and movement, throwing themselves through windows and down staircases. They retain enough physical coordination to climb over obstacles and surge through the school in dense packs. For most students, that is the entire rule set: bite, fever, transformation. Then Guinam gets up again. He has been bitten and attacked repeatedly. He should join the ordinary infected. Instead, he retains speech, memory, and a very personal obsession with killing Cheong-san. Namra also changes without losing herself. She gains heightened senses, strength, and a hunger response she can sometimes control. These half-zombies, or hambies, ruin clean screening. An infected person may still look human, communicate, and make decisions. Some remain allies. Others carry every cruel impulse they had before, now supported by a body that survives damage normal people cannot. Namra hears and smells the infected from extraordinary distances. She can move through their territory with less risk and protect the surviving students. Her hunger also threatens the group during moments of stress. She becomes living evidence that the virus can produce coexistence and danger in the same body. Guinam demonstrates the other outcome. He survives falls, bites, and severe injury, returns repeatedly, and uses his new strength to continue a grudge that began before the outbreak. The virus gives his cruelty durability. A military test based only on pulse, speech, or appearance could easily classify both of them incorrectly. The virus adapts to its host. That is far more dangerous than a uniform crowd because survivors cannot apply one moral or tactical rule to everyone showing symptoms. The South Korean government eventually chooses bombing. It uses sound to draw infected into target areas around Hyosan, then destroys them, killing civilians who may still be trapped there. The military contains the immediate outbreak at enormous cost. Quarantine camps remain. Namra and other hambies survive in the ruins. This universe has fast infected unusual variants and a transmission event capable of overwhelming a city. It also has a competent national response that studies the virus, establishes quarantine, and prevents a confirmed global collapse. For our survivor outside Hyosan, the news provides time. Inside the school, the first day is almost unwinnable, without luck, a rooftop, and friends willing to keep moving furniture. And then we reach the franchise many viewers probably chose before clicking this video. The rage virus turns people in seconds. It keeps them alive. It gives them one overwhelming purpose. 28 years later, it has also started changing. 28 days later, the first infected chimpanzee does not bite a scientist. It sprays blood directly into her face. Within seconds, she convulses. Then she attacks. Rage spreads through infected blood and saliva entering the body. The carriers are living human beings driven into a state of extreme violence. They sprint, climb, and attack with the physical speed of an enraged person who feels no normal restraint. Their eyes fill red. They vomit blood, and conversion happens so fast that anybody hit in the face has almost no window to be isolated. Jim wakes from a coma 28 days after the release and finds London empty. That image alone gives Rage one of the strongest civilization damage cases in this entire first half. A few infected escaped a laboratory, and Britain fell before he woke up. The infected are terrifying at close range, but the original film gives them a biological limit. They need food. Weeks after the outbreak, the remaining carriers begin starving. Major West's soldiers wait behind barricades because they believe time will kill the infected for them. Britain is isolated. Other countries continue broadcasting. There is another uncomfortable advantage. The carriers are still living tissue. They bleed out. They can be sedated. They respond to starvation and drugs. Selena understands the speed of conversion so completely that when blood falls into Frank's eye, she kills him before he can attack. The decision is awful and tactically correct. The military compound also shows why reaching organized survivors does not guarantee a future. Major West's men have food, weapons, and a defensible estate. Their plan for continuing the population turns the refuge into a threat to Selena and Hannah. Rage did not create that decision. Collapse gave violent men privacy and power. Then 28 weeks later proves how fragile that containment really is. Dawn carries Rage without immediate symptoms after kissing Alice, who carries the virus in her body while remaining outwardly unaffected. He attacks people inside the repopulated district. The military tries to lock civilians into secure rooms, which effectively places hundreds of uninfected people beside anyone who turns. Code Red follows. Soldiers move from selecting targets to shooting everyone. Firebombing fails to stop Dawn. Gas fills the streets, and infected survivors reach transport routes leading beyond Britain. For years, fans treated the ending as proof that Europe had fallen. The later continuity pulls the picture back. By 28 years later, the infection remains associated with quarantined Britain while communities elsewhere still function. Lindisfarne survives behind a tidal causeway, cutting itself off whenever the sea rises. Britain itself has changed. Ordinary infected still hunt in groups. Emaciated slow lows crawl through the landscape, their bodies shaped by decades of infection and deprivation. The alphas are something else entirely. Massive dominant carriers such as Samson lead packs. endure extraordinary punishment, and show more awareness than the original infected. That destroys the easy, wait for starvation answer. Rage has persisted for 28 years. It found new stable forms. Then, the Bone Temple introduces evidence that matters even more for this ranking. Dr. Kelson repeatedly sedates Samson and begins treating him with a mixture of drugs. Samson's aggression recedes. Memories and speech return in fragments. He wears clothing, says words connected to his earlier life, and eventually thanks Kelson. The exact permanence and wider scalability of that recovery remain uncertain, but one alpha can be brought back toward conscious human behavior. That is huge. Rage looked like the obvious winner. Seconds fast conversion. Runners. Pack behavior. Evolution across decades. A single carrier can destroy a repopulation program from inside. Its confirmed geography and treatment evidence hold it back. Britain is devastated, yet the human species continues outside it. The sea, military quarantine, and time have prevented a demonstrated planetary takeover. Samson suggests the condition can be medically altered after an almost absurd length of infection. I still would not spend one night on the mainland. Our ordinary survivor in London is probably finished before learning the word rage. Somebody in Athens, New York, or Sydney has a much better first 72 hours because the outbreak comes with a border. So the runners fail to take the whole ranking, and speed is about to matter less anyway. Rage needs infected fluid to enter your body. The next group of apocalypses can move through food, through language, through the AIR, or simply wait inside every person until they die. Kingdom. Place most modern zombies in 17th century Joseon, and your chance of surviving changes immediately. No radio warning, no antibiotics, no motorways carrying people away from the city. A musket takes time to reload, swords require arm's reach, and political orders can travel no faster than a horse. Even a controllable infection becomes far more dangerous when every useful piece of information is days away. Kingdom begins with the resurrection plant. Its purple flower carries parasitic worms capable of returning a dead body to movement. Physician Lee Sung-hui uses it on the king under pressure from the Haiwan Cho clan, creating a ravenous creature hidden inside the palace. The court then lies about the king's condition to protect its power. The mass outbreak starts through hunger and one desperate decision. At Jeolheon, Young Shin cooks the body of Danai and feeds it to starving patients. The infected flesh carries the worms into everyone who eats it. People who had no contact with the king begin convulsing and attacking others. That route is frightening because food is supposed to be the safe answer during a crisis. A starving community sees a pot of meat and receives the infection together. These infected run, climb, and attack in dense waves. Temperature affects their activity. Early survivors believe sunlight drives them into hiding, then discover heat is the stronger factor. Seasonal change makes that misunderstanding lethal. In colder conditions, the infected stay active during the day. Water offers a genuine counter. Immersing bitten victims can draw the worms out before full conversion, and the infected themselves struggle around deep water. Decapitation and severe physical damage work. The underlying parasite can be studied and removed. The frozen lake trap at the end of the second season applies that knowledge on a military scale. Survivors weaken the ice, draw an enormous infected force onto it, and break the surface. The bodies sink into cold water where the parasites leave them. Joseon lacks aircraft and automatic weapons, yet observation produces a mass countermeasure using terrain. The resurrection plant remains dangerous because rulers keep treating it as a tool. It can revive the dead, preserve political authority, and build armies at a cost future victims are forced to pay. Destroying every infected body leaves the plant and the knowledge of its use behind. Joseon's technology and corrupt leadership let the outbreak travel much farther than it should. Officials conceal evidence, sacrifice villages, and keep using the resurrection plant because an undead king is politically convenient. Still, Kingdom gives survivors physical rules they can exploit. Burn bodies. Avoid infected flesh. Use water. Control the plant. Once Prince Li Chang understands the system, whole groups can fight back. The next outbreak traps everyone inside one apartment building while authorities outside already know enough to cover themselves in sealed suits and still cannot agree on whether they are containing a disease or a demon. The REC outbreak. Angela Vidal enters the Barcelona apartment with a camera crew because a resident reported screaming. The fire brigade expects an ordinary emergency. Police are already inside. An elderly woman attacks an officer, biting deep into his neck. Minutes later, the building is sealed from the outside. Plastic covers the exits. Snipers threaten anybody approaching a window. The residents receive almost no explanation. REC works because the quarantine is both sensible and horrifying. If authorities open the door, the infection escapes. If they keep it closed, healthy people remain trapped with victims who are changing through blood and saliva exposure. The building becomes a vertical infection chamber. The first film presents the threat like a rapid biological outbreak. The infected become aggressive, withstand considerable injury, and spread through bites. A health inspector eventually reveals that a resident's dog carried a strange disease and had been euthanized, confirming the government knew a dangerous agent was present before the lockdown. Then the addict changes the language entirely. The camera matters here. Angela and Pablo see Medeiros almost entirely through night vision. The audience shares the narrow green image while something moves just outside it. A conventional infected can be tracked through sound and light. Medeiros has spent years in darkness and turns the final room into a hunt where the humans barely know which direction is safe. Resi 2 then follows a tactical unit entering the same building with protective gear, weapons, and secret instructions. Their equipment does not solve the containment problem. The parasite can move between hosts, and the authorities' understanding is tied to Vatican experiments they concealed from the public. Angela and Pablo find records connected to Tristana Medeiros, a girl investigated by the Vatican after showing signs of possession. A priest attempted to isolate the supposed demonic agent biologically. The experiments produced the material now spreading through the building. Later films lean further into possession and a worm-like parasite transferred between hosts. That continuity shift makes RX difficult to compare cleanly. Scientific containment procedures still matter. Blood and saliva still spread infection. Hosts can also carry a demonic parasite whose behavior refuses to stay within ordinary virology. For our survivor, the exact label changes very little. If you live inside that building, the government has decided the city is safer with you sealed in. Corridors, stairwells, and ventilation routes remove distance. Night vision becomes essential in the penthouse, where Medeiros moves through darkness. Outside the quarantine, the situation remains local enough for authorities to intervene. REC never confirms a global collapse comparable with our finalists. Inside the building, your odds are horrible. Across the wider world, humanity is still standing. At least its agent needs a body. Pontypool infects people through something a radio host uses for a living. Words. Pontypool. Grant Mazzy is in the booth when reports begin arriving. A crowd around a doctor's office. People repeating strange phrases. Violence. A caller named Ken describing events from his weather helicopter, although even that description becomes uncertain. The station cannot see the outbreak. It can only hear language breaking down over the phone. Then Laurel Ann, the producer, starts repeating one word. Missing. She says it again and again. Her attention locks onto the sound as if the meaning has jammed inside her mind. Repetition becomes an early symptom before the infected person attacks and searches for another voice. The idea in Pontypool is wonderfully nasty. Certain English words become infected, and the agent moves through understanding. Hearing noise is not enough. The dangerous moment comes when the listener comprehends the corrupted word. English speakers are exposed through conversation, broadcasts, and emergency information. Dr. Mendez describes the process while the station itself is under pressure. An infected person becomes stuck on a word, then begins searching for a new victim to transfer the condition. When they cannot find one, the body can collapse violently. This gives survivors symptoms to recognize, although recognition requires listening to the same speech that may expose them. A recorded announcement in French advises people to avoid English and stop translating. That is a strangely effective quarantine order. Switch languages, disrupt meaning, and remove the route. Multilingual communities suddenly possess an advantage no amount of ammunition could provide. That turns communication into a weapon. The radio station could warn thousands of people and infect them through the warning. Silence protects you, yet silence also prevents survivors from sharing the rule. The infected retain speech fragments and violent fixation. They repeat terms, mimic sounds, and converge on voices. Grant and Sydney eventually discover a possible counter by disrupting meaning. If the infected word no longer means what the mind expects, the association can break. Kill becomes kiss. Language is deliberately made strange enough to stop the pattern. Pontypool is terrifying conceptually and smaller in confirmed outcome. The outbreak remains local. A counter rule emerges within hours. Speakers of other languages may be unaffected unless the agent crosses into their understanding. An ordinary English-speaking survivor listening to the wrong emergency broadcast could become infected without opening the front door. That is a brutal first-day mechanism. Humanity still has enormous recovery advantages once the language rule is known, so Pontypool leaves the finalist board, and honestly, trying to force a semantic virus onto the same survival scale feels like the ranking is beginning to resent us. The sadness is much easier to understand. Infected fluid reaches you, and the person who gets back up knows exactly what they are doing. The sadness the infected man on the train can speak. He understands fear. He recognizes the people around him. He selects violence deliberately, then communicates what he plans to do. Across the carriage, other passengers begin changing and joining him. The Alvin virus does not empty the victim's mind. It strips away restraint and drives people toward extreme sadistic behavior while leaving memory, speech, tool use, and planning intact. They can lie. They can wait. They can use weapons. A normal zombie wants to reach you. An Alvin-infected person may understand which escape route you are considering and cut it off first. Transmission occurs through bodily fluids. Blood sprays across crowded spaces. Bites and direct contamination spread the condition quickly. Some exposed people take longer to show symptoms, so a survivor can reach apparent safety before the compulsion fully takes hold. That destroys the usual social response. You cannot judge danger by posture alone. Somebody crying and asking for help may still be themselves, halfway through conversion or using your sympathy because the virus has left them intelligent enough to manipulate you. The film's violence is extreme, although graphic brutality alone cannot decide the winner. We care about mechanics and outcome. The infected remain living bodies vulnerable to ordinary damage. Fluid avoidance matters. The story shows catastrophic spread through Taiwan, but it does not demonstrate a completed worldwide extinction or explain how long the infected remain viable. The outbreak also exposes a failure of public reassurance. Officials have spent months downplaying mutations in the Alvin virus. A scientist warns that the strain may affect the connection between impulse and restraint, while the population continues normal routines. When behavior changes, transit systems and hospitals are still full. Kat's partial immunity offers a possible scientific path. Her condition suggests biological resistance exists, although the film never develops that into a public treatment. The military response treats her as a valuable sample and a containment risk at the same time. Once again, surviving the infected does not mean surviving the institution studying them. So meeting one of the sadness infected is almost impossibly bad. It may be the contender I would least want to meet while conscious. The confirmed apocalypse around that encounter remains incomplete. After that, cordyceps almost feels merciful. It generally takes the person away before using their body and keeps that body active for years. The Last of Us. We are scoring the game continuity here. That matters because the HBO series changes the opening route. Its outbreak spreads widely through contaminated flour and builds tendril networks between infected. The games use bites, scratches, and airborne spores released by mature fungal growth. Same broad nightmare, different transmission details. In the games, cordyceps devastates the world in 2013. Runners are recently infected, humans still capable of sprinting, striking, and crying out. Spend longer under fungal control, and the host begins changing. Stalkers hide against walls and move unpredictably. Clickers lose their sight after fungal plates consume the face, then use echolocation and attack with enough strength to overwhelm an adult almost instantly. Bloaters develop thick fungal armor after years of infection and tear pieces from their own growth to throw clouds of dangerous material. That life cycle makes time the enemy. Clearing a building today does not mean the threat inside it reached its final form. Bodies fuse into walls. Fungal colonies spread through dark, damp spaces. Disturb one mature host and a cloud of spores can fill the room. Gas masks give survivors a clear tool. Fire works. Bullets work when they can penetrate the growth. The infected still rely on recognizable senses and physical access. A careful group can patrol, burn nests, and establish predictable safe routes. Ish's sewer community shows how far that adaptation can go. Survivors build classrooms, living quarters, and rules underground. Children grow up there. Then one breach brings infected into the system and destroys years of work. The remains Joel and Ellie find tell the entire story through drawings, abandoned toys, and bodies. A settlement can understand cordyceps perfectly and still lose to one opening. The university and hospital add another problem. Scientific capacity has shrunk with civilization. A potential cure requires specialized researchers, sterile equipment, and the ability to reproduce a treatment at scale. Finding one immune girl does not restore any of that infrastructure. Humanity's biological answer may exist while its manufacturing answer is gone. The civilization damage is enormous. Quarantine zones operate under military rule. Some collapse from rebellion, infection, or shortages. Outside them, communities survive through very different systems. Jackson generates electricity, farms, raises children, and maintains armed patrols. The Washington Liberation Front controls territory in Seattle. Seraphites occupy an island. These societies are violent and fragile, yet they are societies. 20 years after Outbreak Day, the planet has not pushed every uninfected human into a sealed box. People travel between settlements. Crops grow. Horses move across open land. Then there is Ellie. Her immunity appears to offer the cure every apocalypse ranking wants. The Fireflies believe growth in her brain may allow them to create one, and Joel prevents the fatal surgery. Years later, there is still no deployed vaccine. Ellie cannot bite a stranger and share immunity. She remains one person whose condition scientists never successfully translate into population-level protection. That leaves humanity with management rather than cure. Masks around spores, patrols around settlements, fire for infected growth. It is miserable, and one breach can still kill a family, but the rules work. The Last of Us reaches finalist territory because the environment stays contaminated for decades, and the infected grow stronger with time. Its recovery path is narrow, not closed. Jackson proves an ordinary human future still exists outside a laboratory. The next fungus produces children who can think, learn, and speak while carrying the infection. It also grows something in the center of London that cordyceps never quite achieves. Millions of spores, sealed inside enormous pods, waiting for heat. The girl with gifts. Melanie wakes inside a locked cell. Soldiers strap her into a wheelchair at gunpoint. Her arms, legs, and head are secured before she is rolled into a classroom with other children held exactly the same way. Miss Justineau teaches them stories and maths. Melanie answers politely. She is bright, curious, and deeply attached to her teacher. Then a soldier exposes human skin near her face. Melanie changes instantly. Her jaw snaps. Hunger takes over. Every child in the room responds. The breakdown was caused by a mutated Ophiocordyceps fungus. It spreads through blood and saliva, transforming most infected humans into fast, mindless hungries. Smell triggers them. Survivors use a chemical blocker called E-blocker to disguise their scent, coating exposed skin before entering dangerous areas. Hungries can become dormant. They stand in streets, barely moving until sound, scent, or physical contact wakes them. That means an apparently empty route through London may actually contain hundreds of infected waiting in place. The children are different. They are a second generation born from infected mothers. The fungus lives inside them without destroying intelligence. They learn, form relationships, and control their bodies until human scent triggers feeding behavior. Melanie can speak to survivors and fight hungries. Feral children outside the base build traps and work together. Those feral children are already adapting to the ruins. They place food cans as a trail to lure Gallagher, attack in a coordinated group, and choose territory. Nobody taught them military procedure or classroom discipline. Their intelligence developed outside the old human institutions, which means the fungus does not depend on Justineau's students to preserve a thinking population. E-blocker creates a fragile social bridge. Justineau can stand near Melanie after applying it. Soldiers can move past dormant hungries without immediately triggering them. The supply is manufactured and finite. Once production stops, every human interaction with the new generation becomes harder to control. Dr. Caldwell believes these children may contain the key to a cure. She dissects their brains, searching for a way to separate human cognition from fungal control. Melanie is nearly placed on the table herself before the military base falls, and Caldwell eventually reaches an answer nobody wants. She cannot produce the cure humanity needs. While traveling through London, the survivors find a gigantic fungal structure wrapped around the tower. Thick stems rise above the streets. At the top sit closed seed pods filled with spores. If enough heat opens them, the agent becomes airborne on a scale capable of reaching every remaining uninfected person exposed to the environment. For now, the pods stay closed. Remember them. This outbreak already has fast infected, dormant ambushes, environmental growth, and a generation that carries the fungus while retaining human intelligence. The old species is shrinking. The next one can read, "I am leaving the final decision at that tower sealed for now because opening those pods will decide this entire ranking. Before we return to London, the game universes get their chance. They introduce hordes that migrate like animals, mutations built for specific jobs and corporations, engineering creatures that make an ordinary zombie look almost relaxing. Days Gone. A horde in Days Gone is closer to one enormous animal than 500 separate freakers. It sleeps together, feeds together, migrates along familiar routes. At night, bodies pour from a cave and move toward water or feeding grounds in one continuous stream. By morning, they return to shelter. That routine gives Deacon St. John a way to fight. He scouts the path, places explosives near choke points, leaves fuel drums where gunfire can ignite them, and plans a route for his motorcycle. The player can spend an hour preparing for a battle that lasts 5 minutes. Our ordinary survivor does not get Deacon's motorcycle skills, bottomless concentration, or ability to assemble napalm while being chased through a sawmill. If a horde reaches a city street, running becomes a short-term administrative task before death. The Freaker virus affects living hosts. Most adults become swarmers, pale, violent, and highly social infected that gather in huge numbers. Children generally become newts, which avoid healthy adults unless threatened or attracted to weakness. Larger hosts become breakers with extreme strength. Screamers emit cries that draw other freakers. Animals are affected too. Runners turn wolves into faster predators, while infected bears become ragers capable of absorbing punishment that would stop any natural animal. That animal spread is a major containment problem. A wall built to stop human bodies does very little against birds or wolves moving through forests. Every route between settlements stays dangerous even after nearby nests are burned. Nero's field research confirms the freakers retain more structure than people first assume. They mark territory, gather nesting material, and respond to environmental conditions. Deacon listens to scientists discuss diet and migration while hiding close enough to the subjects that one mistake would pull the whole site onto him. The researchers have helicopters and sealed suits. Most settlements receive the information secondhand, if they receive it at all. The sawmill horde turns scale into a physical resource problem. Even with explosives placed in advance, Deacon needs room to run and enough ammunition to thin a mass that keeps replacing its front line. An ordinary community could know the horde's exact route and still lack the fuel required to stop it. Planning works only when industry has left enough usable material behind. The infection also creates an ecology. Freakers drink, eat, sleep, and respond to changing conditions. They are not corpses waiting to rot away. The world supplies what they need to continue. Still, settlements survive. Lost Lake, Copeland's Camp, and Wizard Island support organized human communities. People farm. Militia groups develop weapons and defensive plans. Freaker nests burn. Hordes can be destroyed with enough explosives and ammunition. That would keep Days Gone near the final group until O'Brien removes the comfortable assumption that the infected have reached their final form. O'Brien works for Nero, the organization studying the outbreak. Over the story, Deacon watches researchers treat freaker evolution as an ongoing process. In the final meeting, O'Brien removes his helmet and reveals that he has changed. He remains articulate, intelligent, and self-controlled while showing enhanced movement and infected features. Nero's people are compromised, and the virus is accelerating. So year 1 is ugly, year 2 may be worse. A community can learn the migration route of a horde. It cannot assume tomorrow's infected will follow the same biology. Days Gone still gives us fire, predictable habitats, and confirmed settlements. The freakers evolve quickly, yet survivors can fight the forms currently on the board. Dead Island gives infected humans mutation paths almost immediately, and then tells some survivors that their immunity may be the beginning of another transformation. Dead Island. The first Dead Island outbreak on Benoy is messy even before we reach the zombies. The island is a resort, which means the opening population includes tourists with no local transport, staff living in dense accommodation, and airports or ports that become obvious choke points. Luxury hotels provide food and rooms. They also provide hundreds of doors behind which a bitten guest can turn. The playable survivors wake after a party and receive instructions from a mysterious voice while emergency systems fail around them. Their genetic resistance is discovered through exposure, not a pre-outbreak test. Everybody else must treat every bite as fatal because nobody has a practical way to know who carries the same resistance. The franchise connects it to a Kuru-related pathogen, genetically altered material, and the actions of people attempting to exploit it. Blood and bodily fluids spread infection. Some exposed humans possess genetic resistance, allowing the playable survivors to be bitten without transforming like everyone else. That sounds like a huge survival advantage. It is, for a handful of people. Immunity does not stop a thug from breaking your ribs. It does not help an uninfected family standing beside you. It does not rebuild the resort, restore flights, or produce a vaccine that can be handed to the entire island. The heroes become unusually effective carriers of hope, and extremely effective carriers of sharp weapons. The infected roster changes the tactical problem. Walkers crowd spaces. Infected sprint. Thugs use mass and strength. Suiciders explode. Rams charge with enough force to scatter a group. Floaters project corrosive material. Later outbreaks add further specialized forms. And immune protagonists can enter Fury, temporarily giving in to heightened aggression and physical power. The line between resistance and altered biology is already uncomfortable. Dead Island 2 takes place under different scientific framing. Its outbreak involves the autophagy, a latent element encoded within humanity, and the process creates apex variants across Los Angeles. Crushers, screamers, slobbers, butchers, and mutators express different physical responses. The immune, slayers, can develop into new men who retain identity while accessing abilities tied to the infection. These ideas should stay separated. Benoy's outbreak, the later incidents, and the autophage material are connected by franchise history, yet they are not one tidy pathogen with a single rulebook. Pretending every zombie comes from exactly the same mechanism would make the comparison easier and wrong. Across the franchise, regional containment remains possible. Banoi is isolated. Los Angeles becomes LA, fenced and abandoned while wider structures still operate. The infected mutate aggressively inside those zones, but the story has not confirmed the whole planet falling. For our survivor, being immune only protects against one path to conversion. Physical danger remains absurdly high, and the mutation may be changing the survivor too. For everyone without that biology, fluid contact inside a dense city becomes a lottery they did not agree to enter. Dead Island's monsters are worse than its apocalypse. The green flu moves closer to a true global threat because it creates mutations that feel designed to punish every sensible way survivors organize. Left 4 Dead. Stay together. That is the most obvious rule in any zombie outbreak. A group watches more directions, carries injured members, and combines supplies. Left 4 Dead hears that rule and creates the smoker. Its tongue lashes across distance, wraps one survivor and drags them away. The hunter launches itself onto isolated targets and pins them. The jockey climbs onto a survivor's shoulders and steers them out of position. Every one of these infected turns a momentary gap into a forced separation, so stay close. Then the boomer vomits bile over the whole group, marking everyone for a rushing horde. The spitter coats the floor in acid, forcing survivors to abandon a defensive position. The charger hits one person and carries them through the formation. The tank simply enters the room and turns "hold this doorway" into a very short plan. The green flu's special infected are dangerous because they occupy battlefield roles. Some break formations, some deny space, some attract common infected. The witch sits quietly until noise, light, or direct contact triggers overwhelming violence. Together, they counter teams rather than individuals. The common infected are living humans driven into aggression. They run, climb, and arrive in massive waves. The pathogen spreads so quickly and changes so rapidly that officials struggle to identify one dependable vector. Direct contact is dangerous. Airborne or otherwise indirect spread is strongly suggested as the infection outruns normal quarantine. The campaigns repeatedly lead survivors toward rescue and then show the cost of carrying the green flu with them. A helicopter pilot becomes infected. Military checkpoints treat apparently healthy survivors with suspicion. In the sacrifice, the group faces a choice over who stays behind to restart a generator while the others escape. The virus turns every mechanical failure into an exposure event because somebody has to leave cover and fix it. Weather and terrain matter too. Heavy rain reduces visibility in hard rain. Cornfields hide common infected. Swamps slow movement. The special infected do not need to overpower a 4-person group in open ground when the environment has already broken sightlines and spacing. The director system changes encounters for gameplay, so we cannot treat every item placement as canon. The broader principle still stands. Survivors face unpredictable waves and specialized attackers across multiple American regions, with no single safe route formula lasting for long. The playable survivors appear immune to symptoms, yet they can still carry the agent. That creates the military's worst screening problem. A healthy-looking person reaches an evacuation center, passes every visual check, and brings the green flu to the population inside. Rescue itself spreads the outbreak. This happens repeatedly. Safe rooms are temporary. Evacuation points fail. The military begins treating carriers as a separate threat because moving them with uninfected civilians can create another collapse. An ordinary person gets none of the game's conveniences. No glowing outline around a teammate behind the wall. No conveniently placed ammunition pile every few streets. No warning music when a tank approaches. The first 72 hours would be a blur of runners and collapsing evacuation systems. Humanity still possesses working aircraft, military sites, and scientific teams during the events we see. Survivors kill special infected with conventional weapons. Fire, bullets, and explosives work. Carriers complicate recovery, but the games do not confirm the complete extinction of organized human life. Left 4 Dead ranks very high for mutation and containment resistance. The virus seems to keep producing exactly the body required to ruin the latest human tactic. It stops short of our final 5, because some humans resist symptoms, infected bodies remain destructible, and the end state stays unresolved. Dying light gives humanity one spectacularly effective weapon, ultraviolet light. Then the electrical grid dies. Dying light. Daytime in Heron can trick you into confidence. The infected fill streets and interiors, yet the worst forms avoid direct sunlight. Survivors climb roofs, move above the crowds, and use UV lamps to protect safe zones. A secure room with powered ultraviolet bulbs can stop a pursuing volatile at the doorway. Night changes the city. Volatiles leave their nests. They are fast, strong, and built for pursuit, following survivors across rooftops and through structures that would stop ordinary infected. If one spots you, the chase can attract others. Darkness removes visual warning, while every UV flashlight becomes a battery with a countdown attached. The heron virus begins as a contained disaster. The global relief effort studies it while using quarantine and airdrops to sustain remaining survivors. Antizin suppresses symptoms, creating a dependency similar to Zombrex. Miss the dose and conversion resumes. The GRE also pursues weaponization, because apparently every fictional health organization eventually holds the same meeting. The airdrops show how quickly medicine becomes political. Rise seizes Antizin and uses it to control desperate survivors. Crane burns a supply while following GRE orders, then has to face people whose symptoms will return, because the organization values its secret mission more than the camp's lives. A functioning treatment can increase violence when one group controls access. Safe zones require active maintenance. Infected must be cleared, entrances secured, and UV traps restored. The blue glow around a rooftop gives immediate relief during a chase, while every bulb is another component waiting to fail. Rain, damaged wiring, or loss of generators can turn a recognized refuge into an ordinary dark building. By Dying Light 2, biomarkers make infection visible and social. A person entering a settlement can be checked. That reduces hidden conversion compared with The Walking Dead or Left 4 Dead carriers. The device also tells the wearer that their own body is moving toward a deadline whenever they remain in darkness. Heron is eventually isolated, and a vaccine is developed. Humanity has an answer. Then an altered strain escapes from a GRE laboratory. The THV pandemic spreads globally. By the time of Dying Light 2, most of civilization is gone. Survivors wear biomarkers that display how close they are to turning. UV exposure suppresses infection. People sleep under lamps and arrange entire settlements around power sources. That creates one of the clearest Year 1 failures in the ranking. UV works extremely well, but the cure depends on infrastructure. Bulbs burn out. Fuel runs dry. Batteries discharge. A building can be perfectly safe until somebody trips a breaker. The infected also occupy different stages and forms. Recently turned virals retain speed and climbing ability. Biters crowd streets. Howlers alert surrounding infected. Volatiles dominate the night. Chemical contamination produces even more dangerous zones. Years of mutation create creatures that can enter buildings and reach rooftops. Player parkour distorts the apparent survivability. Aiden can leap between towers, hang from ledges, and glide away from danger. Our survivor probably cannot climb a drain pipe while carrying 30 kilograms of scrap metal. Street level is where the infection has mass. Human communities still exist across the ruined world. Villador has factions, farms, water systems, and enough people to fight over who controls them. The planet remains habitable. UV and daylight offer stable biological counters if humans can preserve power and equipment. Dying Light destroys the old world despite a known weakness. Surviving demands a narrow technical routine. Maintain light, monitor infection, and never let a night breach spread through a dark shelter. It misses the final 5 by a small margin. A world that can hold back the strongest infected with something as available as sunlight still has a lever to pull. Now we reach the franchise with the biggest monster problem in this entire video. Resident Evil gives us viruses, parasites, fungi, tyrants, lickers, and things that should require their own planning permission. The games and live-action films produce 2 completely different apocalypses, though. Mixing them creates a fake contender. Resident Evil games. If we ranked the deadliest creature, Resident Evil would be a nightmare to eliminate. A basic T-virus zombie is only the beginning. The virus can produce rapid necrosis, aggression, and reanimation-like behavior. Under the right conditions, infected humans become Crimson Heads. Further mutation leads to creatures such as lickers. Umbrella manufactures tyrants from selected hosts. Dogs, crows, spiders, and other animals carry infection into places a human quarantine line cannot cover. Raccoon City demonstrates how fast one leak can overwhelm modern infrastructure. The virus reaches the city through contaminated water and animal vectors after the Arklay laboratory disaster. Hospitals fill. The police department collapses. Streets become impassable. Umbrella sends in teams with conflicting objectives while the United States government eventually destroys the city with a missile. The police station is a good example of why a strong building may still fail. It has thick walls, barred windows, weapons storage, and trained officers. Chief Irons deliberately sabotages the response. Umbrella's secrecy prevents accurate preparation, and infected officers rise inside. By the time Leon and Claire arrive, the station has become a maze built from the remains of its own defense. Raccoon's water contamination also removes the basic advice that worked in earlier universes. Staying home and filling the bathtub may expose a survivor before the emergency begins. People drink, cook, and wash with the agent while the public explanation still focuses on violent incidents. The destruction of the city demonstrates both strength and weakness in the wider system. Authorities are willing to kill every remaining civilian to stop the spread. That is catastrophic for our survivor. It succeeds for the country. The surrounding United States does not become one continuous T-virus zone afterward. For anybody living there, survival is nearly impossible. You might avoid zombies and walk directly into a liquor. You might reach a secure police station while a tyrant follows you through the wall. You might drink contaminated water before the first public warning. Then the city is gone, and the wider world continues. That distinction is constantly lost in zombie comparisons. The Resident Evil game universe does not become a global desert. Governments remain active. Cities function. Chris, Leon, Jill, and other agents travel through airports, universities, villages, and urban centers where ordinary life existed before the latest incident. Bioterror becomes an international security problem rather than one permanent planetary infection wave. Later games introduce other agents with different rules. Las Plagas, parasites, control hosts while preserving tool use and coordination. Ouroboros causes extreme mutation. The C-virus produces Javo, who use weapons and mutate around injuries. Mold creates entirely different forms of infection and consciousness. Calling all of that the zombie virus sounds convenient until any Resident Evil fan starts throwing things. Those incidents sometimes reach frightening scale. The C-virus attack on Tall Oaks kills much of the city and forces another large containment response. Lanqiang faces a major bioterror event. Kajuju's population is controlled through parasites. Each crisis proves bioweapons can move beyond one laboratory. Each also meets agents, vaccines, anti-bioweapons, and international organizations formed because the world has already survived earlier attacks. That institutional memory is rare in zombie fiction. Leon does not need to convince every official that monsters exist. The BSAA, DSO, and other groups already build operations around them. Resident Evil's planet is dangerous precisely because bioterror has become recurring, and resilient because people treat it as recurring. In this comparison, those later agents show that bioweapons keep evolving. They also underline the human cause. Terror groups and corporations release them in separate events. Counter-terror organizations respond. Vaccines, anti-parasitic procedures, and targeted containment exist depending on the agent. Resident Evil's monsters are engineered to beat people in rooms. Its world has become surprisingly good at preventing those rooms from becoming the whole planet. Raccoon City remains one of the worst first 72-hour scenarios here. Long-term survival becomes far more believable because the outbreak is contained through an appalling but effective act. Millions elsewhere keep going to work. Governments develop anti-bioterror units. A recognizable world survives for decades. So the games leave the finalist board. The Paul W.S. Anderson films take the same names, release the T-virus across Earth, and commit to the ending people often remember by mistake. Resident Evil movies. The Hive is buried beneath Raccoon City. A vial shatters. The T-virus enters the facility, and the Red Queen seals everyone inside to prevent escape. That containment kills the staff, then the virus brings them back. Once Alice and the response team enter, every security measure becomes another obstacle between the infection and the outside world. The train runs, doors open. Survivors carry the incident upward. Umbrella responds by treating an entire city as another experiment. Raccoon City falls, and Umbrella destroys it with a nuclear weapon. That should be the containment point. In these films, it is already too late. The T-virus crosses borders, infects human populations, mutates animals, and damages the wider ecosystem. Later films show a planet transformed into dry wasteland, its human population reduced to scattered groups, convoys, cloned subjects, and umbrella facilities. Cities sit abandoned under enormous infected populations. Extinction, the third film, makes the environmental damage impossible to ignore. Las Vegas is buried beneath desert. Roads disappear under sand. The convoy searches constantly for fuel, food, and a location beyond Umbrella's reach. Avoiding a bite solves only the next minute. The planet itself is losing the systems required to keep the group alive. Umbrella's underground facilities preserve technology, staff, and genetic material, while surface survivors starve. That imbalance makes recovery harder. The organization with the equipment to develop treatments also caused the outbreak and continues using the remaining population for experiments. Cloning complicates population numbers without restoring civilization. Umbrella can produce copies of Alice and other controlled subjects, yet a laboratory full of clones does not rebuild families, farms, or political communities. It creates more test material for the same corporation. The infected range extends well beyond shambling humans. Dogs carry the virus. Crows become a moving airborne attack. Liquors and other bioorganic weapons spread through facilities. Umbrella clones. Alice repeatedly and continues experimentation after the civilization supporting the company has effectively died. This reaches the final group because the apocalypse is confirmed on a planetary scale. The normal world is gone. An ordinary survivor 1 year and faces contaminated land, roaming infected in an organization that may deliberately use them as research material. Alice changes the personal side of the ranking. Her exposure gives her enhanced abilities and a connection to umbrella systems. She survives encounters no normal person could. We are not scoring Alice. Drop a regular city resident into the same events and most of her escape routes disappear. The films also provide a recovery mechanism. In the final chapter, an airborne antivirus is stored in the hive. Alice releases it, and the agent begins traveling across the world, killing T-virus organisms it reaches. Distribution may take years. Many survivors will die before it arrives. Still, a genuine global counter exists and has already been deployed. That prevents the film universe from taking the top spot. Humanity is almost erased, yet the infection's biological control has a finish line. The remaining population can rebuild behind the spreading antivirus. The damage stays enormous. Billions are gone. Ecosystems are devastated. Umbrella actively accelerated the collapse. It is the first outbreak in this video with both confirmed near extinction and a worldwide visual end state. Keep it on the final board. Army of the Dead now gives us a very different test. Intelligent alphas inside one American city, a wall around the perimeter, and a government willing to erase the entire zone. Army of the Dead. Zeus escapes from a military convoy outside Las Vegas. He is faster and more intelligent than the shamblers he later creates. He can dodge, plan, fight trained soldiers, and establish hierarchy. People bitten directly by him become alphas with greater speed and cognition. The Queen occupies a special place in the group, and her pregnancy suggests the infected may reproduce rather than depend forever on converting humans. Inside Las Vegas, Zeus rules a territory. The alphas communicate. They accept offerings and allow passage under negotiated conditions. They use an organized social structure instead of wandering randomly through casinos. That negotiated entry is an extraordinary weakness and opportunity. A team that respects the arrangement may move through alpha territory without fighting the entire population. Human arrogance breaks the bargain. Martin takes the Queen's head for profit, and every person in the group inherits the consequences. The Queen's unborn child suggests Zeus is building continuity for his species. It also creates a point of emotional leverage. He reacts to her death with grief and focused retaliation. Intelligent infected can make agreements, recognize losses, and pursue specific enemies. They are more dangerous tactically and more predictable socially than a mindless horde. That is an awful enemy to meet. It is also geographically contained. The United States builds a wall around Las Vegas. Refugee camps sit outside it. The infected do not overrun the rest of the continent. When containment is scheduled to end, the government uses a nuclear strike. The city and most of its infected population are destroyed. The characters ruin an available truce by killing the Queen and taking her head, bringing Zeus and the Alphas down on the group. Human greed creates the breach inside the mission. Familiar pattern. Van der Rohe appears to escape after being bitten, leaving open the possibility of another outbreak when he travels toward Mexico City. That ending raises containment risk without proving global collapse. A sequel never demonstrated the extinction event, so we cannot pretend it already happened. Robot-like zombies appear in a few shots, and fan theories multiply from there. The film does not explain them clearly enough to build scoring rules around alien technology or government androids. They stay off the board. Army of the Dead gives its infected frightening intelligence, while the wider apocalypse remains containable. One wall holds. One bomb clears the primary zone. A bite may restart the crisis elsewhere, but humanity has already shown it can isolate the first one. Las Vegas almost holds. The next outbreak challenges every country at once. In one version, slow zombies beat the world through denial and logistics. In the other, they can cross a city in the time it takes you to watch an advert. A World War Z book. The Battle of Yonkers should be a massacre of zombies. The United States military chooses open ground near New York, deploys modern armor, aircraft, artillery, and heavily equipped infantry, then allows the world's cameras to watch. The dead approaching them are slow. They have no ranged weapons, no plan, and no fear. The military loses. World War Z's book Continuity uses solanum. Infection spreads through bodily fluid, usually a bite. The victim dies after an incubation period that varies with the wound and circumstances, then reanimates as a slow zombie. Destroying the brain stops it. Cold can freeze the body, although thawing restores movement. The dead do not sprint or climb into giant living walls. Those mechanics belong to the film. Solanum wins its opening war through scale and human delay. Early cases are hidden, misdiagnosed, and exploited. Illegal organ trafficking carries infected tissue across borders. Governments suppress information. Wealthy people buy fake vaccines. By the time the Great Panic begins, millions of people are moving at once, and every frightened crowd creates new bite victims. The outbreak in South Africa offers an early warning through past experience, and the response planner Paul Redeker understands the brutal arithmetic before most governments will say, "Zombie allowed." Other countries choose denial because the necessary measures are politically unbearable. That delay lets Solanum leave hospitals, refugee routes, and black markets in human tissue. The false vaccine phalanx makes the information problem worse. People believe they are protected, take risks, and dismiss legitimate warnings. A useless medical product becomes socially dangerous even though it never infects anybody directly. Yonkers exposes a military built to shock living enemies. Explosions tear zombies apart without reliably destroying every brain. Incendiary weapons create burning zombies that continue moving. Communication systems flood soldiers with information and images of other units being overwhelmed. The troops see ammunition disappearing into a mass that feels endless. The dead keep making the same sound as they advance, a mass moan carried backward through the horde. Living enemies retreat when losses become unbearable. Solanum has no morale to break. The entire concept of overwhelming force has been aimed at a mind that no longer exists. After Yonkers, smaller groups apply simpler tactics more effectively. Form a line. Control the pace. Fire at the head. Rotate shooters before exhaustion ruins accuracy. The solution is almost embarrassingly basic compared with the technology wasted during the famous defeat. And behind the front ranks, more dead keep walking. The battle becomes a psychological collapse before every weapon is exhausted. Civilians watching the broadcast lose faith in the one force supposed to protect them. This is where slow zombies prove how deadly they can be. A weapon that injures a human may barely inconvenience Solanum. Shrapnel, blood loss, and pain do nothing. Every round must contribute to destruction of the brain, and every soldier who panics wastes the resources required to do it. Humanity eventually adapts. The Redeker plan abandons huge areas and creates defensible safe zones, using some populations as distractions while essential resources are preserved. It is brutally utilitarian, and it works. The United States retrains troops around disciplined firing lines, simple, reliable equipment, and repeated headshots. Winter freezes zombies in northern regions. Organized forces push outward over years. Different countries survive through their geography and culture. Island states gain border advantages. Cold regions receive seasonal relief and a seasonal warning, because frozen dead will move again during the thaw. Submarines and ships escape the land crisis while creating closed communities with their own supply problems. There is no universal miracle. Humanity assembles a recovery from hundreds of local answers. The war leaves countries devastated. Ocean floors still contain infected. Frozen bodies can thaw. Clearing the planet remains a generational project. Yet recovery is confirmed. Governments reform. Armies learn. The oral histories in the book exist because survivors reached a point where they could document the war rather than merely endure it. Our ordinary survivors' first days depend on avoiding panic routes and infected fluid. Once inside a trained community, the rules become stable. Solanum cannot mutate around the new tactics. It cannot hide inside an asymptomatic carrier for years. It cannot sprint through a firing line. The book shows a nearly lost world being reclaimed one careful shot at a time. The film gives you 12 seconds. World War Z film. Jerry Lane is sitting in traffic with his family when the city begins to move strangely. A police officer speeds past. An explosion sounds ahead. People leave their cars. Then, a man is bitten, falls, convulses, and rises with the infected. Jerry counts the seconds. 12. The exact timing varies around the film, but the scene establishes conversions so rapid that one infected person can transform a crowd before the back rows understand what they are seeing. These zombies sprint at full speed, throw themselves into vehicles, and respond aggressively to sound. They climb over one another until the crowd becomes a physical structure. Philadelphia falls in minutes. Apartment blocks become vertical traps. Helicopter evacuation requires a rooftop, an armed escort, and a family capable of crossing streets already filled with runners. Our ordinary survivor probably does not have a former United Nations investigator in the passenger seat. The grocery store briefly becomes a survival hub. People grab water, medicine, and food while police presence provides some protection. Then fear and scarcity begin turning customers against each other. This is the tiny window our survivor needs. After society recognizes danger and before every supply point becomes a fight, Jerry protects his family through movement and institutional access. He calls former colleagues, secures a promised extraction, and reaches a naval command ship. Any ordinary family reaching the same ship can still be removed when it no longer provides strategic value. The film makes survival a logistical privilege as much as a physical one. The infection moves globally through air travel and dense cities. Jerusalem builds walls after interpreting intelligence about zombies, giving it a head start. For a moment, the city appears to have solved the crisis. Then celebratory singing attracts the infected outside. They pile against the wall, build a ramp from their own bodies and pour over the top. The swarm behaves less like a crowd of individuals and more like fluid under pressure. Bodies fill low points, climb surfaces, and spill through gaps. Killing the front row does not remove the force behind it. A wall's height matters only until the pile reaches the top. The infected also ignore their own damage while moving. Falls that would break a healthy person simply feed more bodies into the mass. Their durability is lower than returns dead, and their intelligence is minimal, yet group behavior creates structures no planner expects from people-shaped enemies. That image proves how useless traditional barriers become when enough infected convert themselves into climbing material. A city may possess excellent intelligence and still lose because one loud crowd reveals its position. On an aircraft, a single hidden infected creates another impossible space. Jerry uses a grenade to breach the plane, and the crash becomes the only reason he avoids being trapped in a flying outbreak. World War Z looks like our winner for the first 72 hours. It has the fastest large-scale collapse, immense mobility and conversion speed that makes contact tracing laughable. You do not get bitten, call your family and isolate. You turn inside the time it takes somebody to unlock a phone. Then Jerry notices the infected ignoring certain people. The observation could easily be missed. In a city of thousands running for their lives, one sick child standing still looks like background. Jerry survives long enough to compare separate incidents and test a pattern. One successful transmission of that finding can let a government protect millions, provided the researchers carrying it stay alive long enough. At the WHO facility, the pathogens are stored behind infected staff. Jerry has to enter the same wing that contains the tool he needs. This is an important little survival rule. A cure inside a laboratory may as well be on the moon if nobody can reach the cabinet. A sick boy survives while the swarm runs around him. An elderly man is bypassed. At the World Health Organization facility, Jerry tests the theory by infecting himself with a curable but serious disease. The zombies no longer recognize him as a suitable host. Humanity turns that weakness into camouflage. Curable pathogens are distributed so survivors can move among the infected without being attacked. The ending shows an organized counteroffensive beginning. The zombies remain everywhere, and the war is far from over, but people now possess a repeatable defense that does not require perfect aim or total isolation. That one discovery changes the year one test. The infection wins cities at incredible speed, then loses its ability to target humans who deliberately alter their health profile. Vaccines, treatments, and disease management become weapons. World War Z takes the provisional crown for day one. It does not keep the overall crown. The final major contender cannot be fooled by illness. It can speak, use a radio, and tell rescuers exactly where to find more victims. Destroy its brain and it continues moving. Burn it, and the smoke brings the chemical down in the rain. Return of the Living Dead. Frank tells Freddy that Night of the Living Dead was based on a real event. The government covered it up. The bodies were sealed in military drums and shipped away. One drum somehow ended up in the basement of a medical supply warehouse. Then Frank slaps the side. Trioxin gas hisses into the room. Within minutes, corpses and preserved specimens begin moving. A split dog used for anatomical demonstration pants on the shelf. Human cadavers wake inside the freezer. Even material that should be too damaged to support a body responds. Freddy and Frank become contaminated by the gas. They remain conscious while their bodies change. Their temperature disappears. Rigor mortis sets in. Hunger for brains grows. Because, as one zombie later explains, eating brains temporarily relieves the pain of being dead. That conversation is the first major problem. The captured zombie explains that the dead feel themselves rotting. Brains reduce the pain. This gives them a motive beyond automatic feeding and lets them answer questions about their own condition. It also means a survivor cannot rely on distraction through ordinary food. The target is a specific organ inside living people. Returns zombies. Think. One enters an ambulance, uses the radio and asks dispatch to send more paramedics. When the next crew arrives, the zombies attack them and repeat the call for police. They understand emergency response as a delivery system. The second problem is durability. The yellow cadaver loses its head and still fights. Its body moves independently while the head remains aware. Restraining pieces requires hooks, straps, or sealed containers, and one overlooked hand can keep crawling. Cleanup after a battle may be nearly as dangerous as the battle. Destroying the brain does not work under the first film's rules. A pickaxe through the skull fails. Dismemberment creates independent moving pieces. The warehouse group fights a cadaver, cuts it apart, and discovers that every piece still needs to be restrained. So they try cremation. Ernie warns that the mortuary furnace sends everything into the air. The group sees no better option. They have a moving body that cannot be killed through the brain and no facility designed for permanent trioxin containment. The choice is understandable, which makes the rain landing on the cemetery feel especially cruel. Rainwater reaches soil, bodies, and drains. People outside the warehouse receive exposure without ever meeting the original infected. The agent changes state through heat and returns over a wider area. The body burns at the mortuary. Trioxin-contaminated smoke enters the clouds. Rain falls across the cemetery, soaking the ground and raising the buried dead. The sensible disposal method expands the outbreak. Now every tool from our earlier universes begins failing. Headshots are insufficient. Close combat scatters dangerous parts. Capturing an intact zombie leaves an intelligent prisoner strong enough to attack. Fire aerosolizes the agent. The dead retain speech and problem-solving. The cemetery becomes a feeding ground. Newly raised corpses overwhelm police and paramedics. Calls for reinforcement provide more bodies. Frank eventually cremates himself, while Freddy hunts Tina through the mortuary with enough memory to call her name and understand where she will hide. The military has monitored the missing trioxin drums for years. When Colonel Glover receives the location, the response is immediate and absolute. A nuclear artillery shell destroys the contaminated area of Louisville. The decision comes from an established protocol. Coordinates are verified, the strike is launched, and a populated area disappears before local responders understand the threat. That speed prevents evacuation. It also proves the government has known about trioxin's reanimation effect long enough to build a final option around it. And the protocol is wrong. For a few seconds, the outbreak appears over. Then the blast sends trioxin into the atmosphere. The same contaminated rain begins falling over a larger area. The radio describes the operation as successful, while lightning flashes above another cemetery. That ending gives Return of the Living Dead the worst enemy rules in the ranking. Every conventional response either fails or risks spreading the chemical, and the source is industrial. Trioxin exists in military storage, meaning this one warehouse may not be the only path to another outbreak. We are scoring the 1985 film as its own continuity. The sequels alter the biology, including whether brain destruction works, and forcing all of those contradictions into one super zombie would create a creature no single film actually contains. Even with that limit, Return looks unbeatable. An ordinary survivor confronted by one intact zombie has very few options. A government confronted by contamination may turn the sky itself into the delivery system. So this is the apparent winner. Return of the Living Dead has the hardest zombies to kill, the smartest method of drawing in victims, and the most self-defeating containment chain. Shoot them, cut them apart, burn them, nuke the city. The problem keeps moving. Only one question remains. Did that outbreak produce a worse future than the fungal pods we left closed in London? The final 5. 27 outbreaks entered the comparison. 5 remain. World War Z's film infection owns the opening collapse. 12-second conversion and city-sized swarms give an ordinary person almost no time to understand the threat. The Last of Us brings airborne spores, decades of environmental persistence and infected bodies that become stronger with age. The Resident Evil film universe has the clearest confirmed planetary devastation. Billions die, cities become ruins, and even animal life carries the T-virus. Return of the Living Dead creates the hardest individual zombie to permanently destroy and punishes nearly every large-scale containment method. And the girl with all the gifts has been sitting quietly since the middle of the video with those pods still closed. Before deciding between them, 3 near-finalists need a proper elimination. Dying Light loses because ultraviolet light remains a dependable biological counter. The weakness requires electricity and equipment, which becomes a serious long-term problem. Yet daylight covers much of the planet for half of every daily cycle. Human settlements already build around that fact. Left 4 Dead loses by a smaller margin. Carriers and rapid mutation wreck evacuation systems, while Special Infected can dismantle a team with frightening efficiency. Conventional weapons still kill every form we encounter. Humanity retains organized military and scientific responses. The ultimate global outcome remains unconfirmed. The 28 franchise loses because Britain remains a quarantined zone rather than the demonstrated end of the species. Rage is devastating inside that border. Lindisfarne proves communities can survive alongside it, other countries remain functional, and Samson shows that even decades-long infection can respond to treatment. Army of the Dead never reaches this conversation because one wall contained its primary outbreak. The Walking Dead leaves large societies standing decades later. Resident Evil's games keep their world intact after repeated incidents. World War Z's book explicitly reaches recovery. Our 5 finalists have each removed a different survival advantage. World War Z removes time. The Last of Us contaminates space. Resident Evil destroys scale. Return removes reliable killing. The Girl with All the Gifts threatens biological succession. First, place our ordinary survivor back in their apartment on the morning everything begins. No knowledge, no immunity, no famous protagonist arriving to help. Which finalist kills them first? The first day test. It is 8 in the morning. Our survivor lives on the 4th floor of an apartment building in a major city. They have a half tank of fuel, 3 days of food, a normal first aid kit, and a phone that still connects to the internet. They notice the outbreak when emergency vehicles start moving past the window. World War Z. The first infected reaches the street. One bite produces another runner in roughly 12 seconds. That runner reaches a cluster of pedestrians. Each new victim accelerates the growth. Within minutes, the road is blocked by abandoned cars and moving bodies. Going downstairs means entering the fastest part of the outbreak. Waiting means risking an infected resident reaching the stairwell. Noise draws the swarm. A helicopter passing overhead cannot reach everyone waving from every roof. The correct move may be to hide completely, stay silent, and let the first wave pass. The film shows infected rushing toward obvious healthy hosts, rather than systematically searching every room. A strong door and no visible illness offer temporary protection. Unfortunately, our survivor has no idea that terminal disease provides camouflage, and intentionally infecting yourself on day 1 would be a spectacularly bad guess. World War Z converts people the fastest in the final group. Its runners and swarm structures also make leaving the city nearly impossible once the roads collapse. Resident Evil films. The opening depends on where the survivor lives. Inside the hive, the Red Queen seals the doors and kills everyone to delay escape. Inside Raccoon City, Umbrella closes the perimeter after the population is already infected. Somewhere else during the global spread, authorities may still provide several days of warning. The T-virus travels across multiple routes and species. A person can avoid a human bite and meet infected dogs, crows, or contaminated remains. Mutations create individual threats far beyond a runner. Umbrella may also mislead the public because the corporation values containment of information over rescue. Conversion is generally slower and less uniform than World War Z's 12-second avalanche. That provides a little time to identify a sick neighbor, leave the building, and gather supplies. The scale of later spread means escaping one city only delays the problem. For the first 72 hours, Resident Evil is chaotic and unpredictable. It does not take the speed crown, The Last of Us. In game continuity, spores become a serious threat around mature fungal growth, while bites and scratches spread infection directly. The initial collapse happens fast, yet runners do not convert every street crowd in 12 seconds. A survivor may receive enough warning to stay away from hospitals, blocked roads, and visibly infected people. The danger lies inside buildings. An underground route that seems perfect for avoiding the street can contain spores. Without a mask and a way to test the air, our survivor may inhale the agent before seeing an infected body. Recently infected runners keep normal human speed. The first generation has not yet aged into clickers and bloaters, which slightly lowers immediate combat danger compared with the world 20 years later. This is one of the few finalists where the first day may be easier than the 1000th. Cordyceps has not finished colonizing the environment. Escape early and avoid enclosed fungal spaces. Return of the living dead. One trioxin leak occurs near our survivor's city. If they are outside the contamination zone, the initial outbreak looks small. A warehouse, a mortuary, one cemetery. Emergency calls bring police and paramedics into a concentrated area. Inside that area, survival odds collapse. The zombies can communicate and lure responders. Destroying the brain fails. Even a single cadaver demands restraint strong enough to hold every part of the body. A bite or direct exposure may spread the condition, while trioxin gas can contaminate people before the first zombie is visible. Our survivor hears an emergency alert and tries to drive away. That works until military containment escalates. A nuclear strike gives almost no meaningful evacuation window and creates contaminated rain beyond the blast zone. Return produces the worst direct encounter. Meet one zombie in a hallway, and the usual tools accomplish very little. Its opening scale begins smaller than World War Z, so a person far enough away may still escape the first 72 hours. The Girl with All the Gifts. During the original breakdown, the fungus spreads through bodily fluid and creates fast hungries. Cities fall. Dormant infected later fill streets, but those dense environmental populations take time to develop. Before the pods open, our survivor faces a brutal outbreak with one useful protection. E-blocker can disguise human scent. They do not know that on the first morning. They encounter fast infected drawn by smell and sound, with no established military evacuation that we see succeeding at scale. The second-generation children are not yet the dominant population. Your first day here is nearly unwinnable. World War Z still wins the opening race. So the 72-hour result splits two ways. World War Z is the fastest apocalypse. Return of the Living Dead creates the least survivable individual encounter. The girl with all the gifts has not used its final transmission route yet. That is why the title cannot be answered through speed alone. Our survivor escapes the city. Give them a vehicle, enough luck to pass the first roadblock and a place in whatever safe zone their universe offers. Now move the clock forward 1 year. The 1-year test. 1 year later, World War Z's greatest strength has already produced its weakness. Our survivor now faces a different question. Can they access the camouflage program? A curable disease must be selected, administered, and managed. Medical systems become part of defense. People with no access remain visible to the swarm, creating another divide between protected enclaves and everyone outside them. Still, the method scales. It does not require killing every zombie before movement resumes. A protected worker can repair infrastructure in infected territory. Soldiers can pass through streets that would otherwise demand an airstrike. Humanity has changed the relationship between itself and the swarm. The infected spread incredibly fast because they select healthy hosts. That selection allows humanity to hide in plain sight. Curable diseases turn soldiers and civilians into targets the zombies ignore. Governments distribute the camouflage. Armed groups begin reclaiming territory. The world remains badly damaged. Cities still hold vast swarms. Treatment supply becomes essential, and deliberately carrying a serious pathogen brings obvious medical risk. Yet humanity has a proven counterattack. Our survivor can reach a defended population with a repeatable method of moving through infected territory. World War Z leaves you with hard survival. The first day is nearly impossible, but its camouflage trick gives organized humanity a real way to fight back. The Resident Evil film world is worse after 1 year. Convoys offer movement while consuming fuel. Underground bunkers offer protection while depending on ventilation and stored food. Umbrella facilities provide advanced technology under the control of the organization most willing to sacrifice survivors. Every available refuge carries a serious cost. The antivirus finally changes that equation because it targets the T-virus itself, rather than one infected body at a time. Areas behind the airborne front can be cleared without fighting every creature individually. The surviving population receives land back in stages. The T-virus has moved across the globe. Human populations shrink. Umbrella continues operating through underground facilities, clones and controlled groups while the surface becomes a wasteland. Mutated animals make rural isolation dangerous. The old state system is barely recognizable. Our survivor can join a convoy or secure compound. They still face a planet where clean water, fuel, and food systems have collapsed. Recovery looks almost impossible until Alice releases the airborne antivirus from the hive. The antivirus travels on the wind, destroying infected organisms as it spreads. It may need years to cross the entire planet. People beyond its current reach remain in danger. Still, the infection now has a confirmed global end mechanism. Resident Evil leaves humanity barely alive. Billions are dead and most of the planet is ruined. But the deployed antivirus gives the remaining population a way back. The Last of Us offers no cure after 1 year, and the situation continues for decades. Its survivors possess one advantage the fungal winter will remove. Open air is generally usable. Spores collect in contaminated interiors and around fungal colonies in game continuity. People can farm outside, ride between communities, and patrol without wearing sealed suits every minute. Masks come out when the environment gives warning. That difference sounds small beside clickers and bloaters. It is the foundation of recovery. Crops need fields. Trade needs routes. A child needs somewhere to live after the bunker's original supplies expire. Quarantine zones create food, shelter, and military control. Some endure, others collapse. Outside them, cordyceps colonies establish permanent spore zones, and infected hosts continue developing into stronger forms. Every abandoned building becomes more dangerous as the fungus matures. Ellie's immunity never becomes an available population-level treatment. The Fireflies lose their surgeon, and no later faction produces a vaccine. Human communities survive through barriers, masks, patrols, electricity, and ruthless screening. Jackson proves the recovery path. A child can be born, attend school, eat food grown locally, and live in open air. Patrols encounter infected, but the settlement is more than a sealed bunker waiting for supplies to end. It generates power and expands. The Last of Us means decades behind walls. Cordyceps keeps growing and there is no cure, but Jackson proves people can still build a genuine life in the open world. That leaves two: Return of the Living Dead and The Girl with All the Gifts. Return's 1 year future is difficult because the first film ends at the start of wider spread. Trioxin rain falls after the Louisville strike. More graves can open. Every cremation risks repeating the chemical cycle. Additional military containers may exist. Permanent containment may require separating and sealing every moving piece in materials the infected cannot break, then storing them forever without fire or corrosion releasing trioxin. That is possible for one cadaver in a controlled facility. Scale it to a cemetery, a city, or millions of dead, and the material requirement becomes absurd. Humanity could also stop creating fresh bodies through strict destruction procedures, although the agent's behavior after wide atmospheric release remains uncertain. Every plausible plan is awful, and the film cuts away before showing the final global result. Project that biology globally and humanity looks finished. Intelligent, durable zombies could call for victims, survive ordinary head trauma, and turn disposal efforts into new contamination. The key word is project. The 1985 film demonstrates a city-scale failure and an expanding cloud. It does not show a completed global replacement. There may be containment methods the characters never discover. Burial in sealed materials, chemical neutralization, or permanent physical restraint could matter. We cannot award confirmed extinction for events beyond the ending. Return of the living dead means they eat you for breakfast. Its zombies are the hardest to fight, and almost every sensible countermeasure spreads the problem. The only thing keeping it from the top is that the first film never shows the entire planet being replaced. The girl with all the gifts has lower direct combat difficulty. Hungries can be shot. E-blocker masks human scent. Melanie and the second-generation children can reason. 1 year later, the unopened pods remove every advantage those facts provide. The deadliest apocalypse. Caldwell stands beside the fungal tower and explains what the pods contain. The growth has produced the next reproductive stage. Inside are spores capable of traveling through the air. Heat can release them. Once that happens, uninfected humans cannot breathe the open atmosphere without exposure. At the mobile laboratory, Caldwell uses her remaining time to pursue a cure. She wants Melanie's brain. Her earlier dissections failed, and she believes this final intelligent child can provide the missing answer. Melanie listens, understands the argument, and asks a devastatingly simple question. Why should her life be sacrificed for species that cages and cuts apart children like her? Caldwell has no cure. The old humanity has no scientific path ready. Melanie escapes. She walks to the fungal structure carrying a flame, and she ignites it. Fire climbs the growth. The pods burst open. A cloud expands over London and fills the sky with spores. The transmission route that spent most of the story waiting above the streets becomes environmental. Park steps outside the sealed laboratory and breathes them. Infection begins. He asks Melanie to shoot him before he becomes a hungry, and she does. For a normal human, that is the end of the open world. Imagine our original survivor 1 year after that fire. Their apartment may still be structurally intact. The car may still have fuel. A supermarket warehouse may contain food. None of it can be reached through ordinary clothing. Opening an exterior door becomes an exposure event. A torn respirator seal carries the same consequence as a bite. Weather cannot be trusted to clean the atmosphere. Spores settle on surfaces and move through disturbed air. A vehicle needs filtered ventilation. Every destination needs an airlock. Rescue teams must protect themselves continuously while crossing a world where the second generation moves freely. And clearing an area has no permanent value. In Resident Evil, the antivirus can pass through and leave land behind it. In The Last of Us, survivors can burn a colony and reclaim a route. Here, the reproductive stage has already released across the environment. Killing the nearby hungries removes visible attackers while leaving the agent around the survivor. Avoiding bites no longer helps. E-blocker hides scent from active hungries, not spores from the lungs. Destroying individual infected changes nothing because the reproductive agent is now in the atmosphere. A settlement can clear every body around its walls and remain unable to open the gate. The fungus also possesses a future population. Second-generation children retain intelligence. Melanie reads, reasons, loves, and makes moral choices. The feral children in London hunt cooperatively and learn. They can survive in the spore-filled environment that excludes uninfected humans. The apocalypse does not leave an empty planet. It transfers the planet to hosts already adapted for it. That is the category where Return finally loses. Return has the deadliest zombies to fight. Its rules make disposal almost impossible, and its ending strongly suggests expanding contamination. The girl with all the gifts confirms the decisive species-level outcome on screen. The agent becomes airborne. No cure exists. Normal humans lose access to the environment. A new infected generation inherits it. So here is where each finalist leaves you. World War Z. you probably die in minutes. But if humanity survives the opening wave, the infected can be fooled. The Last of Us, a lifetime behind walls, with settlements, farms, and an open world that can still be reclaimed. Resident Evil's live-action films, billions dead, but an antivirus is already moving across the planet. Return of the Living Dead, they eat you for breakfast, and burning the bodies brings trioxin back down in the rain. The Girl with All the Gifts, no human future. Sealed survival remains physically possible for a limited period. Miss Justineau survives inside the mobile lab. A properly supplied bunker with filtered air could protect other uninfected humans. That counts as biological survival, while recovery remains impossible. Filters expire, food runs out, replacement parts fail. A sealed group cannot farm open land, travel safely, or build a new civilization in an atmosphere carrying the agent. Every trip outside consumes finite protective equipment. Every breach converts the people inside. Meanwhile, Melanie's generation can stand outdoors. They can organize, learn, and reproduce the culture of humanity while living with the fungus that ended ordinary human dominance. So, the answer is the girl with all the gifts. It is the deadliest zombie apocalypse because it defeats our survivor at both levels. The individual loses the unprotected world, and the remaining human species loses any demonstrated path back into it. World War Z can be camouflaged against. Resident Evil releases a cure. The Last of Us supports open-air settlements. Return of the Living Dead remains a projected global defeat at the end of its first film. The Girl with All the Gifts finishes the transition. Only one objection remains. If Melanie and the other children are intelligent, did everybody really lose? Could anyone survive? Miss Justineau survives. Her survival is painfully specific. The Rosalind Franklin was built as a sealed mobile research laboratory. It has air filtration, reinforced doors, and communication equipment. An ordinary house cannot reproduce that protection by closing the windows and placing towels under the doors. Even the laboratory has limits. Somebody must maintain its systems. Food has to come from somewhere. A blocked filter needs replacing by a person who cannot safely step outside. Justineau's remaining life depends on Melanie choosing to support and protect her because the old human supply network is gone. She stands behind the sealed glass of the Rosalind Franklin while spores cover the world outside. The laboratory protects her lungs. For now, she has air, equipment, and a barrier between herself and the fungus. Melanie brings the children to her. The original students from the military base sit beside the feral children from London. Some wear masks around Justineau because human scent still triggers their hunger. They settle into rows outside the vehicle while Melanie maintains order. Justineau speaks through a microphone. The lesson continues. These children carry memories of the human world through the person teaching them. They can learn its language, stories, numbers, and history. Their bodies belong to the organism that replaced it. An ordinary, uninfected survivor might remain alive in another sealed facility. They could count tins, change filters, and listen to the movement outside. That life lasts exactly as long as the machinery and supplies do. The children face none of those limits. They hunt in the city, breathe outside, and gather around the vehicle without protective equipment. Melanie can enter the human laboratory when precautions are followed, then return to the fungal world. Movement belongs to her generation. This is why survivor becomes a status rather than a victory. Justineau is alive. She is protected. She also cannot walk 10 meters beyond the door. Every usable road, classroom, field, and town now belongs to bodies compatible with the spores. Outside, the new children have the sky. And inside the last classroom, one human teacher opens a book for the species taking humanity's place.